complicated story how it happened, but we ended up voting for a textbook called Math in Focus Singapore, which is highly regarded and was a community favorite. It's more expensive than what district leaders were hoping to pay for. It's the Materials Adoption Committee approved of a less expensive textbook that happened to be fairly text heavy. And there were 4 of us on the board who felt strongly that because we have so many English language learners and so many students in the city who struggle with math education, that it was extremely important to go for the text, even though more expensive, that presented a visual way of learning mathematics to make it more accessible to all of our learners. So I'll let Director Peters talk more about this whole saga.
Thank you, Marty. And it's been great working with Marty on this. We put a lot of hours and thought into the amendment we put forth, and we ended up putting forth 2 amendments. I'll tell you give you a little bit of context. In Seattle Public Schools, we reevaluate curriculum every 7 years, and our K-5 math curriculum was overdue to be reviewed and basically replaced. It hadn't really served our students well, everyday math. And so this was a really exciting opportunity for us to really improve the math. And as you know, Marty, this was one of her issues, why she ran for school board. It was one of my issues. And we do have a majority on the board that really cares about getting the math right, amongst other things. So a committee was put together called the Math Adoption Committee, comprised of community members, parents, teachers, and others. It was 27 people, and they were tasked with taking a look at 8 different options and narrowing it down. And they narrowed it down to 3 finalists. And of those 3 finalists, they came forth with 1 recommendation. It's important to understand that they are an advisory committee. And so they're there to give the board some advice, but their choice is not the final choice. The board has the option to accept their choice, reject their choice, or propose something else. So what Marty and I discovered when the committee came forward with their choice, which was Pearson Publishing's Envision Math, what we noticed was instantly the public spoke up and said, well, that wasn't our favorite. We really wanted to have Singapore Math finally in the district. And Singapore Math ended up being the 3rd finalist. And then the other thing that caught our attention was the reason why the committee had not chosen Singapore Math. They said it wasn't sufficiently aligned to Common Core. Now, I thought that was unusual because Singapore Math was one of the things that was used to create Common Core. And so it didn't really make a whole lot of sense that wouldn't have been aligned properly. Digging a little further, it turns out that Singapore Math actually introduces things a little bit earlier in Common Core. In other words, it's a little bit more rigorous. So, we went and took a look at board policy. Board policy 2015 is what determines how we do curriculum adoption. And it says that standards are to be used as a minimum level of rigor, not a ceiling. And so therefore, that doesn't make this something that should be disqualified. Board policy 2015 also says that community input must be taken into consideration when choosing curriculum. It also says that the curriculum materials have to be clear. They have to be flexible. They have to meet the needs of all our students. And a red flag that went up for us when we took a look at the explanation for why the other one was chosen was the committee mentioned twice that Envision Math was very text intensive. That means basically it's wordy. And that's problematic because that has been the problem with our current math, that it's too wordy, it's too difficult for our English language learners to make it through the words to get to the math. And so, for all of these reasons, Marty and I decided, along with some other members of the board, that we wanted to come up with a better alternative, a win-win solution, and that was a dual adoption of Envision, which was what the committee had recommended, and Math in Focus, Singapore Math, which met all these other criteria and the community supported. So we worked very, very hard on this dual adoption amendment, and we submitted it, we talked about it in public on May 21st, we submitted it, and then we brought it to staff, and then staff wrote their analysis of it, and they found a lot of problems with it. They said this would be hard to implement, they would have to hire someone else in order to do two different curricula. And then the principals sent us a letter saying, we don't want a dual adoption, we want a sole adoption, we also want you to follow the recommendation. So there's a lot of pushback to the dual adoption. We were committed to having this be successful. So then we said, okay, everybody wants a sole adoption. All right, so we put forth another amendment, which was a sole adoption for math and focus, Singapore math. And so in the end, that is what ended up being voted in by the board, was the sole adoption of Singapore math and focus. And there were cheers in the crowd when we made this vote, because this has been a long battle in Seattle to correct what has been a weak math curriculum, and we have stepped forth and we've done this. I want to say one thing about the cost. You may have heard that this particular curriculum costs more than the other ones. The final numbers have not been figured out yet. And I'm fairly sure that we can purchase this in a more economical way, that what you have seen are some costs that were inaccurate, and that we don't have to spend as much. In fact, the vendor was at the meeting where we voted, and the vendor was nodding to us that yes, we can go back and negotiate a better deal. They are very motivated to have Seattle be a success story, and so I'm very excited about what happened. Thank you.
I want to add a couple more words. I don't know if you've checked email in the last hour or two, but as you may or may not know, there was some concern that schools were going to attempt to get waivers in order to bypass the board vote. And our superintendent, Jose Bonda, and the principals met, he met with the principal leaders on Monday, and then on Tuesday he met with the whole group. And they have agreed for a way forward to work together. And we just got an email confirming that no waivers have been granted. And also that the 2015 edition of Math and Focus has been approved by the Instructional Materials Committee. There was a bit of a glitch around whether we could get the 2013 or 15 version. So it's clear that the principals and the district staff are coming together to support this and to do everything they can to enable teachers to be successful in introducing mathematics to their students in a way that students understand and that empowers them. So thank you all for your energy in putting Director Peters and me into office, and also Director Peasley and Director Patu were in support of this amendment. And we are hopeful that this is really going to help our district turn a corner in terms of mathematics education, because it has to start in elementary school. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've got time for 2 questions. Walter Sy.
So if the key difference in choosing this other textbook, the one we're going forward with, is the fact that it's accessible to more students, what does that say, or what was the criteria that was used by the committee for choosing the textbook, and why was that not considered, or was it considered?
That's a good question. And I think the adoption committee, okay, the question was, if one of the criteria is for the materials to be accessible to every student.
Well, you said that was the advantage, so I'm curious.
That was the advantage of Math and Focus.
I'm curious if that was the criteria.
One of the criteria. Was that one of the criteria? Well, that's a good question. My feeling is that the Math Adoption Committee did the best work they could with the information they were given. It's not clear to me, though, that they were given the proper guidance in terms of board policy. Because the fact that they themselves noticed that the one that they had recommended was text heavy and not clear should have shown them that wasn't following, what our criteria was. And, there were other factors as well, like the material that they had chosen is very technology dependent, and I brought forth some questions in terms of, do we have the infrastructure to implement that, and is it distributed equitably throughout the district? And that question wasn't really answered. And the other thing to know about Singapore math is, and the process. Board policy requires benchmarking to be done when choosing a curriculum. In other words, taking a look at who else has used it and whether it's worked well. And benchmarking was not done in this process. And that was very baffling to us, because we have highlight.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, we have to move on to one more question, then we gotta move on with the program.
Okay, then
I'm gonna let Leslie Harris ask the next question.
Segue, benchmarking. Director Peters, did you not ask in early April, late March to get benchmarking data from the district? Were you in fact ignored all the way up to the board vote?
What I asked for was, when they first came forth with the costs for the 3 finalists, there was a huge disparity in the math and focus one. And so I wanted to know what the breakdown of the cost was, what the actual line items were, so in order to make an apples-to-apples comparison. So back in, when it was in April, I requested this information, and it was not provided. And 5 weeks went by. I had to request 3 times before it was finally provided, and that was after the vote was already taken. And then once I took a look at those numbers, I could see there was things we did not have to purchase. For example, $1 million worth of manipulatives, I don't believe we need to purchase. And so it was clear there was a way to...
I'm sorry, I was asking about benchmarking. Other districts that have used the
Okay, once they-
curriculum, Highline, Shoreline, yada, yada.
Yes, okay, that did come up. It's when they brought forth their recommendations with vision, and they showed that they didn't do benchmarking, we said, why is that? Highline has used Math and Focus now for about 2 or 3 years. They're having great success. They have 70% free and reduced lunch, high poverty students, and they're having great success with this. Why wasn't this brought up? Schmitz Park, Boron K-STEM, they are both successfully using Singapore Math and Math and Focus. This was not brought into the discussion, it was not brought into the advisory committee, it didn't make sense, plus it's board policy that they should. So when you look at the benchmarking data does support what we ended up voting for.
I would like to thank the school board members very, very much for coming to see us tonight.